What's going on, Giants fans? Daryl Slater here with Bob Brookover on the latest episode of our Talk is Cheap Giants podcast from NJ.com, the Star Ledger, NJ Advanced Media. Coming to you here 2 days after the Giants improved to 6-1. Another dramatic win. Of course, that's pretty much the only way they win, the only way they play. Every game a one-possession game so far through 7 weeks for the Giants. 6-1, 4 straight wins, tying their second longest winning streak since their last Super Bowl championship. Right now, they got an 86% chance of making the playoffs, at least according to the New York Times model with that. And we all know, obviously, it's been a long, long time since they have. At least it feels like it, since 2016, since they made the playoffs. And right now, they're the top wildcard seed, fifth seed in the NFC. Trip to Seattle coming next, as the Giants look to try to continue here their best start to a season since 2008, when they started 11-1. So again, just the numbers continue to, on so many levels, be impressive in terms of the overall performance of Brian Daboll's first team. They got a win that wouldn't necessarily be qualified as shocking, I don't think, in Jacksonville. Maybe how it ended was kind of crazy, as always, but that was a game the Giants should have won. They did win. They found a way to win despite some flaws. And so Bob, what are your takeaways here coming out of a Week 7 win, 23-17 down in Jacksonville?
That's 6-1, winning in the end. That's what the 2022 New York Giants do. Daniel Jones played a great game. I haven't seen all his games, but certainly the best one I've seen, and I got to think it's one of the best ones of his Giants career. It's funny because you can really, when you listen to Brian Daboll, he was upset about a lot of things after that game. Daniel Jones is not one of them. He is really growing fond of his quarterback, and he should be, because he's really helped them in a lot of ways win games. And maybe not all conventional. The drop back quarterback hitting long passes, but he's finding ways every week. Saquon banged up, played another terrific game. The offensive line banged up, really had a great last drive. The defense gave up huge chunks of yards, but every time they needed to make a big play, they made one. It's kind of the formula they've put together, that whatever they need to do to win, they do it.
Yes, indeed. And we can start with Daniel Jones, 19-30, 202, 32-yard beauty of a touchdown pass to Darius Slayton. And of course, Jones making Giants history, I guess the first Giant quarterback in however long, 70 years. I mean, look, let's be honest here. They had a couple quarterbacks who were statues, who were really good players, but like Phil Simms was not a running quarterback, and neither was Eli Manning. But anyway, Daniel Jones, 107 rushing yards and a touchdown. So obviously, whenever your quarterback runs for more than 100 yards, that's impressive. And so regardless of how often it's ever happened in your team's history, but another really steady performance, and steady in some ways, and certainly really impressive and spectacular in other ways for Daniel Jones. And again, we'll see what becomes of this at the end of the season. He's obviously in a contract here. Everybody knows that. But the one takeaway the big, broad takeaway that I had of him coming out of this game was that he's developing, and I wrote this for Tuesday morning. For Monday morning. Into the type of demanding and delivering leader that the Giants need. Number one, delivering in big spots. I mean, he has now, Daniel Jones, 5 game-winning drives, counting the field goal drive against the Panthers. 5 game-winning drives out of 6 wins in 7 games for the Giants this year. I mean, that's remarkable. And fourth quarter comebacks, 4 of those. So he's tied for the NFL lead in fourth quarter comebacks. He leads the league by 2, a margin of 2 in game-winning drives. And you talk about a kid who he won 3, 5, and 4 games in his first 3 years. So this is uncharted, whatever the word would be, territory for this guy. He had 3 game-winning drives total in his first 3 years, 2 fourth quarter comebacks total in his first 3 years. And the demanding part, I think, I know he apologized look, it's not like he got in Marcus Johnson's face. It's not like he railed against the guy on the sideline or he shoved him or something. He expressed frustration about a guy brutally dropping a pass. I think it's okay. I have no problem with a quarterback being demanding of the players on his offense. And I'm sure Marcus Johnson's not crying about, the fact that his quarterback was frustrated. Like, I know Daniel Jones apologized for that. I don't think he needed to.
How many times have we seen really great quarterbacks, Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, get upset at their receivers for dropping balls or running wrong routes? It's when you've got the cachet to do it, and right now Daniel Jones has the cachet to do it. There's nothing wrong with it. You're just demanding. You're demanding more from. You're demanding that your teammates play to the same standard that you're playing right now, and he's playing at the highest possible standards you can play. I mean, ESPN QBR rating has never been kind to Daniel Jones, and there are factors that go into it. Other than it's different than a passer rating. I don't know the exact system how they do it, but right now he's number 6 on that group, and as I look at the group, it starts Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Tua, Geno Smith, and Lamar Jackson. Of those 6, I would maybe the only 2 I wouldn't take Daniel ahead of right now is Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen. And the part of that is because I'm not sure Tua is going to stay healthy the rest of his career. Geno's older, and we watched Lamar Jackson play 2 weeks ago, and yes, he's a great dual threat, but Daniel right now I think is a better passer than him, and maybe not as good a runner, but a better passer and controlling games, right? And definitely, as you just pointed out, better at finishing games. Lamar has not been good at finishing games this year. So, I mean, among stories in the NFL right now, Daniel Jones is certainly in the top 5.
100%. I think, and again, like, it's one thing to get upset at players, your teammates, receivers or whatever, when you're not delivering, but he is. Like, so he's talked about, like, not, I want to be composed and all that. Okay, like, I get that. You want to be composed. But he's being composed when it matters most, in big spots late in the game. I mean, we all saw it again. The Giants get the 4th-and-1 stop on the Trevor Lawrence quarterback sneak, Geno Smith in there, and then they turn right around. They drive 79 yards down the field and take the lead for it with a touchdown to go up 20-17. And then they ice the game with that really impressive 9-play, if you count the field goal, 8-play drive where they run the power run 8 straight times. And so 2 drives to 1 to take the lead, 2 to kind of ice the game, as we all saw how it came down to the end. But he's delivering, and he is being composed when it matters. So I get what he's saying, that he doesn't want to show up his teammates. He's a nice guy. He doesn't embrace, like, being a jerk. I'll say jerk, right? Because we'll be friendly here. Like Aaron Rodgers sometimes does. And look, like Brady can too. And you know what? To have that arrogance, that works for those guys, obviously, because they're incredible players. That's not necessarily Daniel Jones' personality. So I understand him, getting a little annoyed at himself for stepping outside of that. But hey, look, I mean, Eli Manning did it at times. There's nothing wrong with being demanding of your teammates. And especially, like I said, if you're being composed when it actually really matters in terms of the performance at the end of games. So no matter how you slice it, another clutch performance from the Giants offense. And we'd be remiss here if we didn't mention Saquon Barkley, of course. He's got the NFL lead with 906 total rushing / receiving yards. Nick Chubb second at 807. And another, again, this guy has not had an off game yet. He's playing with a sore shoulder. I know Brian Dable got a little down on him for not getting out of bounds in that or for getting out of bounds, I should say, perhaps maybe protecting a shoulder on the last drive. But the bottom line is, 25 receiving yards in this game and 110 rushing yards, including like a couple really big runs in that last drive. So look, I can't get too down on him for running out of bounds. But what did you make of another strong day from Saquon Barkley?
It was funny because on Monday, I think Dable was felt like he might have been a little too hard on Saquon on Sunday after the game. Dable gets so caught up in the emotions of the game that they come out on Sundays. That's where we see him. That's where we see his emotions. We don't see him the rest of the week. But on Monday, he was more. Saquon's been great. I love Saquon. it was just another great performance. And sticking to script, he didn't have a great first half. They shut him down the first half, uh, and then when crunch time comes, he just picks up huge chunks of yards. The other great thing I thought from the Giants' perspective is, the coach is mad at him. The only person more mad at at Saquon Barkley than Brian Dable was Saquon Barkley. I mean, he took it and said, "Hey, I got to be better than that. I can't do that. I know the situation. I didn't do the right thing." He talked about, "I'm going to close my eyes on the plane and envision myself doing it the right way, and try to get rid of it." But he held himself accountable, and to me, again, it's Daniel Jones trying to hold others accountable when he's playing to such a high standard, and Saquon Barkley, your two big offensive leaders, are both doing everything the right way. It's impossible not to have great team chemistry when you've got your two best offensive players playing and doing the right things all the time.
Yeah, and I think the one thing about Saquon Barkley throughout his career, he's never like chafed at criticism from his coaches. I remember, Joe Judge criticized him in practice, called him, yelled at him or whatever, and that's never bothered him. He has obviously, very obviously, chafed at criticism from people outside, whether those are analysts or everyone remembers Tiki Barber criticizing, and honestly, rightly so, Saquon Barkley's pass protection, which has improved this year, by the way. That's the criticism that's kind of seemingly bothered him, but he's really been good at accepting that from his coaches, and certainly that's another example of that. But if you talk about an area of the Giants, maybe look, I think that this nitpicking or whatever that the Giants are doing, it's good. It's a sign of a team that's holding itself to a higher standard and isn't just happy with winning. And I think an area, maybe if that Barkley stuff is a little bit nitpicky, I think an area where it's not nitpicky right now, and you can even hear this coming from Leonard Williams after the game, is this Giants defense has not been the same these past 2 weeks. They got gashed, especially in the first half, by the Ravens and the Jaguars. They gave up a big yardage number again. They almost blew the game in colossal fashion at the end of the game, if not for Fabian Moreau and then Xavier McKinney and Julian Love keeping Christian Kirk out of the end zone in the last play of the game. There are concerns for this defense. And Leonard Williams, I talked to him after the game, wrote a story about this for today. He is not hiding from that. He is not pleased with where this defense is right now. And honestly, he shouldn't be, especially because they're going to playing not only a tough place to play in Seattle, but an offense that's performing well, and Geno Smith, who's surprisingly doing a really nice job this year. So what's your concern level for this Giants defense at this
I'd
point?
say it's very high, and I'd say again, it wasn't just Leonard Williams. Julian Love talked about it.
Yeah,
Xavier McKinney called it their worst defensive game of the year, and it was. They gave up 458 yards. I think was a season
yeah,
high.
52.
What's that?
Yeah,
Four,
452. Yeah,
452 season. It was a season high. They got ran on uh, for big chunk plays. Travis Etienne ran on him. It was not a good defensive performance at all, except for coming up with big plays and turnovers. But even penalties on that last drive kept things alive. Um, they can't continue to play this way, and if they do play that way, I think in Seattle, where A, it's a tough place to play, and B, Geno Smith has, you know, I just said Daniel Jones is one of the top 5 stories in the NFL right now. Geno Smith is certainly in that group too with what he's done with that team. He said everybody had me dead. He hasn't had a game yet where he's thrown for under 64% completion percentage, and in 5 of his 7, he's thrown over for 70 yards. He's turned the ball over, thrown 2 interceptions, and he's got 4, 6, 9, 11 TDs, 2 interceptions. He's been sensational. So if the Giants defense goes to Seattle, it's really, really tough place to play. One of the loudest stadiums I've ever been in. And you're not, unlike last week where there was Giants fans traveled really well and gave the Giants kind of a home field advantage in Jacksonville. It was New York South. They're not going to have that in Seattle on Sunday. That place is going to be loud and tough to play.
And I think one thing to really look at for this team is, um, I know Kenneth Walker, the rookie for the Seahawks, is not maybe necessarily a bounce it outside guy, right? He's a shorter, broader guy.
He's a Spartan. I love the Spartan, so I gotta.
I honestly, I know he's been spectacular this year. Honestly have not watched a lot of Seahawks, but he's been one of the keys to their offense. But so
Well, I'll just say this before we move on. I watched Kenneth Walker play a lot last year, and the name that came to mind for me, I watched pretty much every Michigan State game, was Barry Sanders. I mean, he really,
okay, yeah.
really, really elusive and tough.
All right, so my little thumbnail sketch of him was a little bit off there, but he obviously is a quick guy. Then, so again, we don't get to watch a lot of these other games, but uh, to that end, with the challenges that Kenneth Walker will pose for this Giants defense, regardless of how well or not well the Giants have been playing lately, and they have not been playing well the last 2 weeks defensively. They got gashed by Kenyon Drake, 119 yards on 10 carries. They got gashed by Travis Etienne, 14 carries for 114. I mean, those averages are ridiculous. 12 yards a carry and 8 yards a carry for Drake and Etienne. So uh, that's a problem. And Leonard Williams talked about it openly after the game. Teams are seeing it, he said. They're starting to scheme against us with runs to the outside. I'm kind of paraphrasing there. And he just said, the quote here, we just need to tighten it down. And they certainly do, because teams are going to keep attacking them in that way if they don't get that sorted out. And so for as much as we talk about Geno Smith, redemptive story, former Jets, Giants, flame out, it's really Kenneth Walker who could be a nightmare for this defense if the Giants don't get this buckled up.
Well, and Geno can run too. That's the other thing
Yeah.
that he can do that can cause a problem for that. I don't know exactly what the run fits have been for Wink. There was a sideline shot of him toward the end of that game that he just wasn't happy with the way his defense was handling that last drive. There were a lot of shots of him not being happy last week. I don't know what they have to do to tighten it up, but whatever it is, Wink's got to figure it out because they do have to protect the edge a lot better than they have.
And we're talking a little bit here about some concerns, and I think rightly so. The reasons for success are obvious, so it's reasonable to talk about some of the concerns, and injuries are one of those. But before we dive into the injuries, I think let's revisit real quick. I mentioned it just briefly. The fact that the Giants ran that power run play on eight straight plays on that, all 8 plays of their field goal drive that should have iced the game to make it 23-17, right? So they not only did that, which is impressive, but they did that while down their left guard, Ben Bredesen, out with a knee injury, and down their right tackle, Evan Neal, also out with a knee injury. And we'll get to the overall injury update in a bit, but how impressive was that the Giants were able to do that, even if, again, Saquon Barkley ran out of bounds, the fact that they were able to gash the Jaguars like that.
It was really an impressive drive. They bullied the Jags on the last drive. They just said, you know what? We're in our 4-minute offense, and our 4-minute offense is going to be the same play 8 straight times. We'll run a variation off of where one time they give it to Breida because Saquon was on the sideline for one play, and one time Daniel Jones pulled it out and ran for 15 yards himself because by that point the Jags had no idea that they would do anything other than hand the ball off. But Tyree Phillips, who filled in for Evan Neal, or no, I guess it was more. Well, Tyree Phillips did a few times they ran because they would run it left one time, but Andrew Thomas was pulling and blowing guys away on that play. It was just the offensive line for being a makeshift offensive line at that point. In a lot of ways, 3 of the 5 guys or 2 of the 5 guys, it was a really impressive ending for them, and just overall an impressive day. They kept Jones clean. They created big holes for Saquon. Offensively, that probably was the Giants' best game of the season. And the fact that they could go into a 4-minute offense and say, we're going to beat you just by running the ball down your throat, it's a great sign for this team.
It really is, and I think putting teams away is something that this group has to get better at, and maybe not having as many dramatic wins, and so that they would have certainly done that if they had made that Jaguars last drive less eventful. I think everyone could have framed it as, hey, they put him away. they got the last field goal drive, they ran it down their throats, and then they got a stop or whatever at midfield for the Jaguars. That obviously didn't happen, and they came 1 yard short of basically blowing the game. But so
The one thing I want to ask Mike Kafka on Thursday when he's available is where did that come from? Because I covered Andy Reid for 8 years, and Andy Reid would have broke out in hives if he had to run the ball 8 straight times, even in the 4 minute offense. And Mike Kafka just said, "Nope, that's it. That's my play. Stop it," and they couldn't. So anyway,
yeah,
go ahead.
it was remarkable and impressive for sure. And I think as you look ahead to this Seattle matchup and what the Giants are going to be dealing with, and especially in terms of their offensive line, they're facing a Seahawks defense that's not been great, 25th in PFF compared to the Seahawks offense being 7th. And then you talk about Seattle's run defense average at 17. So the Giants, though, are going to be without Evan Neal. He's not going to play this week. He could be out about a month or so with a sprained MCL. They'll surely be without Ben Bredesen, who's got a knee injury of some sort. And you got to remember here that the Giants were going to start Shane Lemieux as their left guard before Ben Bredesen, and he has a foot injury. So as you consider the totality of their injury situation, and then Daniel Bellinger, their really impressive rookie tight end, he had a very freak eye injury. He's going to have surgery. His vision will be okay, it sounds like, but he may not play again this year. So Bredesen, Neal, Bellinger all go down in Jacksonville. And like I said, I mean, Bellinger might be done for the year. I'd expect Neal and Bredesen to be out a few weeks at least. And Lemieux already out. He hasn't even played this year. And so not even counting guys like Sterling Shepard, who are definitely out this for the whole year, not even counting those guys. Here's a rundown of the guys who either definitely will or might not play in Seattle for the Giants. Of course, Shane Lemieux, Daniel Bellinger, Evan Neal, Ben Bredesen, offensively, along with Kenny Galladay, Kadarius Toney. And then on the defensive side, O'Shane Ximines, we'll see if he can come back from the quad injury this week. Azeez Ojulari is now on IR with that calf injury that has not gotten much better. And then Aaron Robinson, the cornerback, obviously, who was a starter on the shelf with a knee injury, I believe, right? So on IR. So I don't know when he's eligible to return, but look, that's a big list of guys. Those are just notable players. I'm not even including Cordell Flott in there, but I'm just talking about really notable players who the Giants either definitely will or perhaps might not have in Seattle. That's a lot to overcome, I think, especially for their offensive line. And if you include Bellinger in that group because he's such a good blocker, a lot to overcome.
It is a really lot to overcome. The one guy who probably maybe this helps a lot, who's been trying to make his own comeback, is Nick Gates, who they have to make a decision on. I think this week, correct? Is the and
Yeah, he had 21 days from the time
right,
from the time he returned to practice.
right.
So
So, I mean, given the offensive lines, especially two, you mentioned Lemieux and Bredesen. Josh Azudu, the rookie, is probably going to be starting there. I can continue to because he was kind of quasi starter there at the start of the season. But they're going to need depth on the offensive line, and that might bode well for Nick Gates. But yeah, I mean, it's been a theme since training camp. The Giants have been, it's a theme in a lot of places, but the Giants have had certainly more than their fair share of injuries here through, which makes another part of this story that has been so impressive is that they've been able to overcome all these injuries. And they're going to have to continue to do it. It's going to be a tough week to go out there, a long trip to make, and some more guys filling in here. See if they can do it.
yeah, and regarding, you were exactly right with Nick Gates. He returned to practice off, kind of essentially coming off the pup list, but not officially, on October the 5th. That was a Wednesday, and he had 3 weeks, 21 days for the Giants to figure out what they want to do with him. And so that 21-day mark will come
Tomorrow, right?
tomorrow, Wednesday, as we're talking. So if they do not activate him, he'll spend the rest of the year on IR. Now it's possible. They could activate him and try to buy a little more time here. I mean, he would be taking up a roster spot, obviously. and then give him a little more time. Like, so just because they activate him doesn't mean he's going to play in the game this week.
Right.
So there's some gray area there. They don't have to just quit on him, may not be the right word, but just make a total call of, oh, either he's starting or playing or he's going to be done for the year right now. But they do need to figure out if he's going to be elevated to their roster or not. Now, look, I mean, it's been a long road back for the kid, and so we'll see. I mean, it's obviously he sustained such a serious injury that his football career is probably still in doubt. But I think the Giants right now, like how do they? They're gonna hope obviously that Neal and Bredesen come back sooner rather than later. But the tight end situation, yikes! What do they do? How do they address that? I know before we got on here, we talked a little bit about um, a trade. What do you make of the possibility with the trade deadline looming a week from today, as we're talking, November the 1st?
In theory,
What do they do?
it sounds great. A trade sounds great. Go get the name we talked about is Mike Gesicki, who's a Jersey kid, and a really good player, who for some reason is not getting the ball nearly as much in Miami this year as he had the previous 2 years. But in practice, not so easy because they got a 2.7 million left on their salary cap. As we figured out before we came on here, they would owe roughly 6 million to Gesicki unless they could get the Dolphins to eat some of that. It becomes very complicated, very difficult, and then you factor in why do the Dolphins, even if they are giving the targeting Gesicki less, they're still very much in the playoff race, and they're a great chance to win their division. Well, not win their division because Buffalo's in that division, but great chance to make the playoffs. Why not just keep him for the rest of the season? There's a lot of factors that make all of that difficult. I saw some things online. People go get Gronkowski, and that that's not happening. So I mean, I think they do need to do something. At the very least, add somebody to the roster to be tight end if in fact Bellinger's not coming back. And you hope for the kid's sake that he is coming back because he's played tremendous in his rookie year, far better than I think the Giants could have even envisioned. But if they don't go get somebody big, they're gonna miss Bellinger, and Dable said as much yesterday.
They definitely will, and look, Gronk is not coming for numerous reasons, most of which have to do with the fact that the Giants don't even have enough money to pay him what he probably wants.
The biggest one being he enjoys the Gronk life, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And look, I think, if the Bucks were good, maybe he'd jump back in with Brady, but whatever. But the Gesicki thing, having to eat the Dolphins, having to perhaps eat some of that salary means they're probably going to want more in draft pick compensation. Of course, just Gesicki's a rental player. He's in the final year of his contract. So there's that, which generally balances out to the other side, right? The receiving team would have to give up less. So there's so many different things to consider here. Then there's the fact that the Giants don't have a huge draft haul next year. I mean, they have one pick in round 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 5. They do not have a 6th-round pick. They have 2 in round 7. So it's not like they could ship a 6th-round pick that could become a 5. They could send a straight up 5 to Miami. But again, the money stuff is probably the biggest hurdle there if you're just considering Mike Gesicki. So they are going to have to perhaps and probably roll with what they have because of their limitations. And I honestly don't think that like giving up a draft pick, even a 5th rounder, is a wise move for a team that still has a lot of roster holes, and the player would be a rental player. So there's just a lot of things that, well, in practice or in practice probably don't look as good as maybe if you just pipe dream it. But the other one that to me I think that is perhaps worth addressing here as we consider the bigger picture for this team, because again, look, I mean, there's bigger picture stuff at stake here for the Giants, even though they're 6-1. They want to become a winner over the long haul. They don't want this just to be a 1-year type deal. Look, the Jets in 2015 come to mind. They went 10-6. Everyone thought maybe they can build on it. It wound up just being a flash in the pan. But Saquon Barkley's value has never been higher. I know people are going to get furious as they hear this, but look, the Giants are at a position where Saquon Barkley's value has never been higher. He's in a contract year. If you don't think you're going to pay him, they're not going to trade him. But I'm just kicking this around. What if you could get something really high for him in terms of draft pick compensation, and that would let the Giants perhaps be in better position to maybe move up for a quarterback next year because they're not in position to do it. So there's a lot of things here. They want Daniel Jones to thrive. They want Saquon Barkley to thrive. They want to make the playoffs. They want to win playoff games. But uh, how about wrapping your head around all the big picture stuff as it pertains to Saquon Barkley, Daniel Jones, the future, and then the trade deadline?
It's why Joe Shane gets the big bucks. I mean, he's got some really, the way he visioned things, perhaps coming into this job, where his hardest work was going to be, or his workload was going to come after this season when he figured out Daniel Jones. And I have no idea. He would have never said it anyway. What was in his mind about Daniel Jones coming into the season and Saquon Barkley, but both those guys have made any future decision about them really, 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 and I'll say really one more time, difficult. If this team makes the playoffs with, let's say, 11-6, 12-5 record, and then wins a playoff game, and then you say, okay, and then you don't have a high draft pick or a way to really move up, now you're looking at, it's hard to get a franchise quarterback after the 20th overall pick. And it's, and say what you will about Saquon, that you shouldn't take a running back as high as the Giants took him. You don't just go and replace Saquon Barkley with anyone either. So Joe Shane, I'm sure, is really enjoying being 6-1, but also thinking about, now, how am I going to figure this out? How are we going to get better? It was funny because I had a conversation with Joe Banner before this season started, and he was saying so many teams try to go and win that first year, and end up, fooling themselves to thinking that they're good rather than just taking that step back. And I don't think that's what the Giants did. I think they made smart moves with Barkley and Jones, and then they said, let's play it out. And it's playing out in a way that has been fantastic to watch, but made Joe Shane's future decisions very, very difficult.
They absolutely did not try to win this year.
Right.
I mean, they were not tanking in the way that the Panthers are tanking, but they had to do a lot of things in terms of shedding, cap numbers like James Bradbury. It was a good player just to be able to get under the cap. They couldn't sign anybody, so like the whole thing, like didn't no one thought this team was going to win. And so, yeah, that puts them in a little bit of an interesting situation going forward. Because again, I get back to the 2015 Jets. They did go all in that year. They signed Revis, and tried to get the band back together and all that, and trying to push for a win immediately. And they did win immediately, but it wasn't sustainable. But the Giants did not do that. So I think that was a good point that Joe Bannon brought up. But in spite of the fact that they didn't try to win, they are winning. And so with Jones, what do you do? I mean, the franchise tag probably around $32 million next year, which would set essentially the bar for any long-term contract negotiations, because why would he take less than that fully guaranteed in this contract? So maybe you could take that 32, 35, 38 and spread it over a certain amount of time to limit the cap hit, but then you're committing to him for more than just 1 year. Or do you let him play out at $32 million for 1 year next year? There's a lot of balls to juggle here for Joe Shane, even though he's going to be in better cap health next year at about $61 million in cap space after ripping the Band-Aid off this year. And then remember, he's going to cut Kenny Golladay. That will add some more cap space to that. They're not going to cut. They probably can't cut Leonard Williams now because they had to rework his deal. So much to consider. As for Saquon Barkley, there's going to be a fairly high profile free agent running back class next year, which will along with the fact that a lot of these second deals to running backs have flopped, I think that you could probably re-sign Saquon Barkley for a lot less than, some monster Christian McCaffrey, Ezekiel Elliott type deal. He's going to want big money, but the market may dictate, because of past circumstances and current volume of players and running backs in the market, that he's not going to get that. So I think that could play in Joe Shane's favor, certainly. So a lot to consider, but none of it really has an impact on what's going to happen this week in Seattle. So look, I mean, the Giants 6-1, they get Seattle bye week, home against Texans, home against Lions. This team could be 9-1. We saw Brian Dable smoking a victory cigar on his way out of the stadium in Jacksonville. Will he be doing it again Sunday in Seattle? What do you say?
As you pointed out, Seattle's defense is not great, and they've given up 27, 23 or more, 5 of their 7 games. There's a 39 in there against the Saints, a 45 against the Lions. Some big numbers, but they've also put up some big numbers. They've put up a 48 and a 37, and a 32. I think this is going to be a tough week for the Giants to travel. It's one game ahead of their bye, and I've been to Seattle. It's a really tough place to play. I've been there a number of times. It's a great fan base. I'm going to take the Seahawks this week in a crazy wild game, 27-24.
That would be par for the course. I wonder if at what point does it stop being crazy? Maybe it would be crazy if they actually won or lost the game in like normal fashion. But I'll go Seahawks 34, Giants 24. I just think there's a lot working against the Giants this week. They're going up against a good offense. Giants defense is not playing well, especially against running backs lately. Kenneth Walker is a huge challenge. And again, they're going across the country, playing in a tough venue, and they're banged up. And I think eventually, some of this tightrope walking that they're doing is going to run out on them. But again, they've given themselves a tremendous amount of wiggle room here at 6-1. So look, 6-2 going into the bye is with home games against Texans, Lions coming on the bye. You feel good about that before that trip down to Dallas on Thanksgiving. So that's still a collision course, going to be an epic game, and we'll see what happens this week, but I'll go 34-24 for the Seahawks in this one. I think we'll wrap it up there, and appreciate everyone listening. So be sure to like, subscribe, review us on all your various podcasting platforms, as they say, and we will talk to you guys next week, coming out of the Seattle game and coming out of Halloween. Hope everyone gets a bunch of good candy and all that good stuff next Monday on Halloween. So enjoy your week, everybody. Enjoy the game this weekend, and take care.